In this video, I'm going to show you how you can scrape questions from Stack Overflow. So Stack Overflow is a website, if you don't know, that people can ask programming related questions and get answers. And it's also a place where you can copy code from to make your programs work, which is quite cool. Anyway, I digress. So to do this, we're going to use a basic HTML scraper. We're going to be using request and beautiful soup. But what we're going to do is we're going to make one function that takes the tag, so we can change that tag and we can then search for different questions using the same web scraper. So to start with, let's just quickly import what we need. So we're going to need requests, and we're going to need beautiful soup. So from BS4 import beautiful soup. And then let's go ahead and get the URL that we need. So if I come to the website here, we can see that I've got a list of questions tagged with Python. Now, if I change this to something else, let's say flag, and we follow their format of the square brackets, we can see now we've got questions tagged with Flask. And if I look at the URL up here, it has the main URL /question/tagged Flask. So if I go and change that back to Python in the URL, it takes us back to where we were. So if we copy that, put that in here, we can see that this is our tag. Active is useful because those are ones that haven't been closed. So we might want to, this will help us look for the new questions that we may be interested in, or we may want to go and answer. So what I'm going to do to start with is I'm going to create some headers. So we'll say headers is equal to, and we are going to send a custom user agent just because it is good practice, and we will get our user agent from Chrome by typing into Chrome my user agent, and we can copy this text string here. If you don't know what user agents are, I have a video about them on my channel which I will link to. Let's put that in there. Okay, so now we've got those two, we can do r is equal to requests.get, and then we want to go and get our URL, and then headers is equal to headers. So to check that that's working, we're going to go ahead and print r.statuscode, and that should give us a 200, which means we've connected successfully. If you get 400s, that generally means the page doesn't exist, and 500s is generally unauthorized. So just check where you're looking for the data. So we want to create our soup object now. So I'm going to do soup is equal to beautiful, I always spell this wrong, soup, and we're going to give it the r.text of the response, the text of the response that we got back, and we're going to do html.parser here. Make sure you include a parser, otherwise you'll get an error when you try and run it, although it will still work. So let's check that the soup is working properly. So we'll do print soup.title.text, and this should hopefully bring back the title in its text form of the page we are looking at, which it has, and recently active Python questions is exactly what we were looking at. So now we know that this is working. So I'm going to move these up and out the way, and we're going to go ahead and find out where the information is on the page. So if I use the inspect element tool and sort of hover over, we can see we managed to get the whole sort of question thing here. So when we look at it on the left hand side, we can see we have div with the class of question summary, and that's repeated, and as I sort of hover down these, you can see it changes. So that's a good sign. So we want to go ahead and we want to copy this class, because this is the things that we want to find. That's got all the information in. So I'm going to say questions is equal to, and it is soup.findAll. Okay, and it was a div, so we're looking for the HTML div, and it had a class of question summary. So all we're doing here is we're using find all, so that's going to find every instance of that. So if I do print the length of the question, we should get the total amount back. Now on the page it's 15, and we are getting 15, so that's great, that's working. So let's get rid of that. Now we need to do a simple for loop, so we're going to loop through every single question summary div that it has found, and we're going to be extracting information out of that. So let's do for, let's call it item, I like to call it item, for item in questions, and let's go back to our page, and within this let's get a few bits of information. So let's get the title, we'll get the number of votes, and we'll get the date as well, so we can see that there. So if I hover over the title, we're actually getting an A tag that has the text of the title in and also the link. So we'll grab the link as well, that makes sense. Now this A tag is in a summary class, but right here we can see that it has its own class of question-hyperlink, which means we can just go straight to it. We could go to it anyway, but it might be a bit more difficult if it didn't have a class, because we would need to find all and then index through them. And that's perfectly doable, but in this instance, it has a class. So I'm going to copy that, and we're going to say our title is equal to item.find, because we are searching for each item in here, but we're using the find. And it was an A, and it had a class of question hyperlink, and we want the text out of that in this instance. So if I go and print title, we should get 15 titles for each one of the things, except I've done something wrong. That should be a comma and not a dot. So we can see we've got 15 titles back. If I just move this up, the first one was give 2 data frames, and that's probably because we haven't refreshed the page. Here we go, that's the first one. So we know that it's working fine. So move this back down and out of the way. So we know we're getting the title. We also want to get the link. Now, as I showed you, the link was in that same A tag, but it was just in one of the attributes, that it was in the href attribute. So if let's go link is equal to, now we can copy this because it was in exactly the same place, but instead of the text of this element, we want to get the href. Now to get at the href or any attribute from your element, you just need to put it in square brackets and call href. So if I now go print link, this should give us what was in that href. So we can see that we have the text back of the questions and all of the links to the questions. To create a full link for that, I would just concatenate the first parts together with the second part. So we could just do it like this, because these are both strings. So make that smaller. These are both strings, so we can just add them together like this to create a full link. There we go. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is let's get the votes. So let's find where they are. Here, and it's in a span of class of the vote count post. So we can do exactly the same thing, item.find. And it was a span tag, not spam, span. And again, class in our curly brackets, and then paste that in. You see that this has a space at the end. We don't want the space, we're going to remove it. And we do want the dot text from the element. Because this is going to return a string, but it's actually a number, I'm going to wrap the whole thing in int, and we're going to turn it into an integer. This means that when we export it, it comes through as a number, and we can treat it as a number. So we could filter, index, etc. So there we go. That's worked fine. And the final thing we were going to get was the date that it was posted. So if we look at these top few ones, we can't see that there's an actual date, but it does say how long it was modified. So if we hover over that, we can actually see here that we have a span tag that has 10 seconds ago was the last activity. But what it also has is a date time object here. So we can grab this title from this span tag and we can use that. So we're going to do that. So we're going to say that the class here is relative time. So let's go for date is equal to item.find, and it was a span tag again, and the class was relative time, and we want the attribute of title. We don't want the text out, because the text was here that said 10 seconds ago, which is no use to us. But this title attribute here has the full date time object, so we can take that instead. So let's print out the date, and hopefully we should get 15 date objects. There we go. Great. So that's the information that we are going to take from the questions. Now, anything that you see here on this page you could find out if there's been an answer. You could take this with the div class status answer or whatever, or you could get the views, all that sort of thing. Any information you see here you could collect, but we're going to stick with just these 4 bits of info for the moment. To put this into something presentable for us to come out the other end, we're actually going to turn this into a dictionary, and then we're going to append that dictionary to a list that we can then work with at the end of our code. So I'm going to say this could be a question, which is going to equal, and we're going to create our dictionary. We'll put this bracket at the end. Now to do this we need to change all of these into keys, so the title, link, the votes and the date, and then we need to make the item.find the value. We do that like this, and remember to put a comma at the end of each one, and that will turn that into a Python dictionary that we can then work with. So let's check that that works. So we'll print out question at the end, and let's run that, and we've got here 15 sets with a title, the link, how many votes there are, and the date. Great, so that works. What we want to do now is we want to append that to our list. So now we need to create a list that we can append this question to for our output. So outside of this, right near the top after our headers, I'm going to create a list. I'm just going to call it question list, and then here, instead of printing the question, I'm going to do question list dot append our question that we created here. So every time this loops through and finds this question, like I showed you, it's going to append that to the question list here, and we'll have a long list of dictionaries at the end that we can use. So let's check that that works. So we'll print our question list out at the end. Let's run that. And we can see now, instead of getting them all one by one, we've got everything all in our dictionary, in our list of dictionaries. So we've created a short scraper that gets the question information. Now, if we look here at the URL, we can see that we have the Python part as our tag. So what we can do is I'm going to turn this whole thing into a function, and we can then input the actual tag that we want to find the questions for, and then output those ones without having to change our URL. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of our print question list. I'm going to then indent all of this inside a function. So I'm going to say define our function, and let's get questions. And then inside that, we're going to give it a tag. So I'm just going to write the word tag. So when we call for our questions, we're going to say the question is related to this tag, and the tag goes here. So I'm going to remove that word Python. I'm going to put the word tag, and I'm going to turn the whole URL into an F string. You see it's changed color. On my code editor, it changes the color. So what that means is when we call this function and give the word that we're going to put in here, tag, it will put it into this URL, and then we will run the rest of our code and get the questions related to that tag. So let's just close this up a little bit so it's a bit neater, and then have our return after our function and loop has ran. Now we're going to test our function. So we're going to say get questions, and we'll give it a Python, and then we will print our global questions list and run that. So we can see that that's worked. We've got all of those questions. So we've got the first 15 on the page. Great. So then let's run that again. Get questions. Instead of Python, let's change it to Flask, and then we'll print out the length of the question list, so we can just see that it's easier for us at the moment to test and see that it's working, because the length of the list is getting longer. So with just Python, we get 15. So if we do Python and Flask, we should get 30, which we do. So then let's do one more. What else is useful? Let's see if there are any questions on Streamlit. 45. So every time we run this, because we're putting the tag in here, we're getting the next set of 15 questions. Now, if we wanted more than 15, or if we wanted to do numbers of pages as well, we could do that. So let's check out how that works. So if we scroll down and then go to the next page, page 2, we can see that we get the page equal to 2 gets added onto the URL. So let's go ahead and put that in. And let's go back down to just one function. We've also added in this page size is equal to 50, so maybe we'll get 50 questions. We do, we get the 50 questions. That's on page 2. Let's go down, change it to page 1, 50. Right, that's still working. So what we can also do is we could have two things to put through our function. We could say page as well. So we can take the page number out and we can do page in here, and now it's going to put the word tag where we put tag. It's going to put the tag, and the page is where we're going to put the page. So what we can do now is we could do Python and then put number 1. So that's going to run through and get the first 50 on that page. We change that to 2, it would get page 2. So we can now do a loop. So let's get rid of let's move our question list down here. So we can do for x in range, and we'll do 1 up to 3, so that just should get us 2 pages. And then indent this, and then put x here. So when each time we run through this loop, it puts an x. It's the x becomes the next number, so it starts at 1 and it will go up to 3. And let's run that. So it's going to run through a couple of pages, and there we are. I've got 100. So we could then also copy this, and let's do Flask. And I'm actually going to leave it at that for now, and let's run that. So we're looking at having 200 results now. So we've got 2 lots of pages, each for Python and each for Flask. If you wanted to do more than that, you absolutely could, but I would start to introduce times to make it wait in between each one. Otherwise, we might find that we get blocked quite quickly. So now that we've managed to create our function that gets the question information for us, we've chopped up the URL so we can ask for a specific tag and pages, and then looped through using x in range for each of the functions. I'm just going to collapse these down now. What we're going to do is we're going to work on the output. So to output or to save anything, I almost always use pandas. It's a really useful and easy way to do it. So we're going to import pandas as PD, and we're going to create a data frame with our list, with our question list, and then we can output that to CSV, to Excel, or whatever we like. So I'm going to say df for data frame is equal to pd.dataframe, and then pass in our question list, and then I'm going to print df.head. And that will, df.head will give us the top 5, I think, rows of our data frame, df being our data frame here. And I'm going to comment out this one for now, just so we don't send too many requests. And we should get, so we can see here we've got the title, the link, and it's all in a nice data frame for us. If we wanted to export that to CSV, we can do df.toCSV like this. I'm going to use .toXL in this case. And then we just need to give it a name. So we'll do stack questions .xlsx. If you've not run df.toXL before, it might come up and you might get an error and it says you might need to install another pip package. I think it's called xlrd. Just pip install that and this will work fine. And then at the end, I'm going to do a quick print statement. I'm just going to say fin for lack of a better word, and we'll put our Flask one back in. But before we export it, I'm actually just going to put one more line into our question so we can work out what tag it was associated to. So just before here, just so we can make it a bit easier, I'm going to say tag and tag, because that is what we've called it here. Okay, so let's save that. Let's run. Hopefully we get no errors. Finished. And if I open up where the Excel file is, we can see we've got here the tag that it was associated to, the title, a bit small, a bit bigger, and the link, number of votes, and the date. We've actually put the index in here as well, but that's easy enough to get rid of. When you do 2XL like this, in this spot you just do index is equal to false, and that will remove the data frame index from the export. So that's it, guys. That's quite cool, quite a nice easy way to find pages that have the same data, and then you can manipulate it, and we can create one function that does multiple different things for us. So we can just go ahead, in this case we can get the different tags and the number of pages just by using one function over and over again, and not having to write a long lines of code. So hopefully you guys have found this useful. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. I've got lots of web scraping content on my channel already, more to come. I'm live streaming. I'm trying to live stream once a week. The last one was last Thursday. It was really cool, good fun. Everyone came and hung out. So make sure you keep your eyes peeled. If you subscribe, you'll see that it will come up on your list that I'm live streaming. So thank you very much, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.